We continue forward with the exploring this theme that we've been looking at here at St. Paul's of 8th grade faith. That is, we learn things as a child, and then they're meant to mature into something as an adult. And has my faith matured, and what does that look like? Our first message was about rules versus relationships. And we looked at the two sons and the prodigal son, and that first son wanted to make up his own rules and rebelled, and that's not good. And the older son was very fixated on the rules and became a Pharisee, and neither one had a good relationship with the father. And then we looked at the idea of possessions and the parable of the dishonest steward, and what is my relationship with the things of this world, and do I have a balanced relationship? It's all part of a mature adult life and faith. Then we looked at the reality of, is my faith seen as something as an hour I do on Sunday, or an integrated part of my whole life? Last week we spoke about rote prayers versus prayers from the heart, and what those two are and the roles of both of them. Today is really interesting, a little different, and really the theme is parents' faith versus my faith. Parents' faith versus my faith. And it really comes down to a couple of things. One, am I going to accept or reject the faith that's come to me? And two, no matter what happens, I still have to have faith be my own thing. I have to embrace it as an adult and accept it. That's what we're talking about today. So when we're kids, we grew up, we learn from our parents. We learn from our parents, the good and the bad, all of it, right? We learn it from our parents, but a lot of good. We learn our faith from our parents. And as we grow, eventually the decision is going to come before us. Do I embrace this faith? Do I keep this faith or not? Well, that's a big question, isn't it? It's a question that is in every one of our lives. Do we accept the faith that's been handed on to me or not? Ultimately, what's really important is no matter what, I have to accept that faith, and I have to have a personal faith. Just because my grandparents and my parents were holy doesn't mean I'm going to automatically go to heaven and be holy. I still have to do that myself. But I want to look at this reality of, am I going to accept what's been handed on to me? And you say, well, my parents weren't believers. Well, then the generation that handed the faith on. The faith has been handed on generation to generation to generation from Jesus, Peter, and Paul all the way down. And it's been handed on. It's been handed on. And our parents and our parental generation handed it to me. What am I going to do? Am I going to embrace that faith? Am I going to make that faith my own? Something around this one thing for us. So I think that's a question that all of us are asking. And some of you are like, I know, I want nothing more than my children to embrace the faith that I've handed on to them, and many of them haven't. And some of you have children right now. A couple of thoughts. One is the witness of the faith is so important. The witness of faith is so important as part of handing on the faith to the next generation. I grew up, and I'm so blessed, have really wonderful, faithful parents and grandparents who I got to witness their faith. My parents, with them, it was like we're going to go to Mass every Sunday. We went to religious education. We did all those things. But I'd have to say that it was my grandparents that witnessed that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday kind of faith that really impacted me. My mom grew up in the generation where faith was much more lived at home. They prayed the family rosary. They had the holy art in the house. And they did a lot of that kind of stuff. Then as my mom grew up, and this is no judgment against my parents. My parents were part of a whole generation that kind of stopped doing those things. It's like, well, that was the faith of their parents, and grew up in a culture that was much more like, we're going to look forward, and why look backwards? New is better. New is better. And so I didn't grow up with piety in the home. Didn't grow up playing the rosary unless there was a funeral. Now, we talked about those things. I have good parents. I'm not throwing them under the bus. We went to Mass. We said a meal prayer. But in terms of the overall witness of faith, my grandparents, I saw them, my grandpa, every week going to the county jail to visit the inmates. My grandparents going to the nursing home every week to take communion. My grandma making funeral dinners every week for people who had died. Now, certainly they were retired, right? And my parents were raising us kids. I get that. But at the same time, I saw that. And that impacted me in a big way. So it's an encouragement to you who are parents. Man, live that faith at home. I know it's hard, but this is what we want to pass on to our children, huh? But ultimately, then it comes down to us. No matter what our experience was growing up, now, what am I going to embrace as an adult? Am I just flat going to reject what's been handed on to me by my parents because it's from my parents? Which can be an easy temptation, isn't it? Oh, it's mom and dad. Oh. And so there's a tendency in every generation, but particularly in our culture here, to reject what's handed on to us because what's new is better. That's particularly our culture. You and I live in a culture that very quickly wants to move away from what's been handed on. And the best symbol for that is, and I'm not speaking, this is our culture, I don't want to be bad, but the best symbol for that is we are the culture that as soon as we can, we all move away. And it's kind of symbolic of we're moving away. And when we move away, we tend to move away in our thoughts and our beliefs as well. It's just the reality of our situation. So this message is about, what am I going to do? Our culture is sort of training us to always look forward. And there's nothing wrong with progress and looking forward, unless it means letting go of Jesus and this great tradition of faith that is being handed on. So I want to encourage all of us young people, don't be so quick to let that go. But at the same time, you need to grapple with your own faith, and it needs to become your own and not just your parents. But they're offering something, hopefully, that's good. And we can go, well, my parents weren't perfect. None of us were perfect. Don't judge God based upon that. And I love the story of Naaman and the 10 lepers because it fits this so well. There's this tendency where we are, I'll put it this way. Remember Jesus talking about how prophets are oftentimes honored except by their own home? You heard that before? Like the prophets don't receive honor and respect in their own hometown. Isn't this Jesus, the carpenter's son? I say that because we tend to minimize the things we grew up with. We minimize the things we grew up with. And back to Naaman. Remember, Naaman was the general who was not a Jew. He was not a believer in the Jewish community. He had leprosy. And he heard of Elisha, this Jewish prophet. And he goes and he knocks on Elisha's door. I think this is just such an amazing scene. Elisha opens the door and there's this non-Jewish general. Oh, hi. And Naaman says, I hear you can help me. And right up the sidewalk is all of Naaman's army. His colonels and his lieutenants, they're all there. And here's Naaman guys, I got an errand to run. Excuse me for a second. I got to go talk to this holy man. And he talks to the holy man. Can you help me? And Elisha says, God can help you with your leprosy. Wonderful. What do I have to do? Name it. Well, the Jordan River is right up there. And you need to jump into that river 7 times. Excuse me? Yeah, the river, it's right up there. You crossed it on your way. Now, you need to jump into it 7 times. You're joking, right? Seriously. Brothers and sisters, doesn't our faith seem like that sometimes? Doesn't our faith seem that sometimes seriously? This is ridiculous. Really? This is what we're supposed to believe and do? And Naaman goes, though, And his whole retinue, that's the word that they use to describe all those people, follow Naaman. And Naaman goes up to the riverbank. Can you picture this? He goes to the riverbank and he's like, okay. And Kersplash jumps in. And then he crawls out of the river and jumps in again. And then he crawls out of the river and jumps in again. And he does that 7 times. His lieutenants and stuff must have been thinking, oh my gosh, Naaman's cheese has fallen off his cracker. He's crazy. And we're all so afraid to look crazy to the people who we respect, huh? We're so afraid to look weird to our peers. And they thought he was crazy until his leprosy went away. They thought he was crazy until they seen him completely do a 180 with his life, accept the God of Israel, become a whole new man, a whole new way of thinking and believing. His whole character changes after this because he begins to believe in the God of Israel, and he begins to follow these commandments, and his whole life takes on a whole different look now. Oh. And that's the point, is that our faith isn't just something we believe, it's integrated into our life. And it makes it easier to embrace and understand when we see it integrated into our lives, like my parents and my grandparents. My parents now, they're at the food bank multiple days a week. My mom helps with funeral dinners. They help with hospitality. They're so involved, right? They're there, like they're living it. I see it. It's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's not just, why are we doing this on Sunday? This is only a part of it. And Naaman saw that. And he's like, this is amazing. But see, he didn't grow up with it. Remember I talked about earlier, the prophet's not accepted in his hometown? We tend to sort of see what we grew up with as like, lame. Because it's what I grew up with. The 10 lepers seek healing. 9 of them are Jews. 9 of them are Jews. 1 is a non-Jew, Samaritan. And the only one that came back to Jesus was the non-Jew, the Samaritan. He says, 10 were cleansed. Were they not? Where's the other 9? The point is, there's this tendency to reject what you grew up with, not embrace it. And yet the people from the outside look at it and go, this is amazing. Last night I was teaching RCIA. This is the people that want to become Catholic. They're like, this is amazing. A large number of our seminarians who are training to become priests are converts. They're like, this is amazing. And the guys going up Catholic are like, why would I want to become a priest? Woohoo. And the non-Catholics are like, this is amazing. I'm making a point here for all of us, huh? Being a little silly. But we all have this question to face. Who am I going to be? What am I going to believe? What am I going to embrace and why? Am I going to reject it just because it's old? Am I going to look to this just because it's new and different? Good questions, huh? So a mature faith balances all of that. My encouragement to all of us is, let's open our eyes. Let's have the eyes of Naaman. Take a good, honest look at the faith that's been handed down from Jesus and Peter and Paul and Mary, all the way down to us, and go, wow, this is amazing. And am I going to integrate it into my life? It's because I have to, in the end, make it my own. Can't still be my parents' faith. It has to be my faith, or my grandparents' faith. So I'll end with this. Live your faith. Live it. Live it. As best as you can. And the second thing, let's pray. Let's really pray for one another. Let's pray for one another and who we're going to be and how we're going to live. Pray for all of those in the generations who are coming ahead of us, right? Who have, maybe those who have dropped what's been handed to them or in that questioning period. Let's love them and pray for them. And pray that they might have a Naaman moment like, whoa, there's something here that I didn't see before. And they might pick it up and embrace it. Huh? You might pick it up and embrace it. So that's our theme for today. Our parents' faith and my faith. Where are you at with all of that? Where are you? It's a great thing to sit with and ponder. I love what's been handed on. As St. Paul says, I hand on what I have received. And he invites us to take it. And every generation's made it a little bit more their own. It looks a little different. Let's take the faith, but then make it your own and live it.